Mulan told me that her class had begun studying frogs. In fact, she revealed she had a report to do and began to explain the basics of what she'd learned. So, Mom, first the frogs lay eggs in a pond, and then the eggs turn into tadpoles, and then the tadpoles turn into more frogs. I squinted my eyes. Biology, and science in general, was not my academic strong suit. My 12 years of Catholic schooling did not dwell long on biology, God didn't want us thinking about that, and avoided the subject of reproduction almost entirely. Eventually, I mumbled a response. Yeah, I think so. I think, though, that it's probably just the females that lay the eggs, and then the males fertilize them, although I don't know for sure. And there are probably all kinds of species of frogs with different ways of doing things, but yeah, in general, I'm willing to bet the females are the ones with the eggs, or something like that. Huh? Mulan said, listening carefully. But what does fertilize mean? I said, oh, the males have this substance inside of them, and it's like a co-ingredient called sperm. They sprinkle or squirt it on the eggs. That's how they get fertilized. It takes both the female's eggs and the male's sperm, and together they make the new tadpoles. So, only the females have the eggs? Mulan said, her eyes wandering to the ceiling, taking this all in. Yes, I said. Humans too? She asked. Yes, I said. I deliberately forced a pause. I tried to think of some other subject to move on to. Mulan asked, where do women keep their eggs? Well, I said, we women have evolved to have our own pond right inside our own bodies. We lay our eggs in this pond, which is so convenient when you think about it compared to frogs, because we don't have to worry about any competing eggs. It's a pond of our own. Where is it? Mulan asked, her eyes bigger than ever. It's in our lower abdomen, inside us, below our belly button, above our vagina. I had managed to be specific and totally vague all at once. Perfect! But how do the eggs get fertilized? By the man, I said, thinking, why did I use the phrase, the man? Aside from its conformist, big business connotations, I had possibly implied that there was only one man, some special man, who was used only for this purpose. Creepy and weird, and of course, incorrect. But how does the sperm get in to fertilize the eggs? She asked. I said, oh, yes, that. Well, the sperm comes out of the man's penis, and it goes into the woman's vagina. This happens when the two do what's called have sex, and that's where the egg, there's usually only one in the woman's pond at a time, gets fertilized. Only after the fact did I realize that I had said the words penis and vagina and sex in a strained sotto voce tone, just as my own mother would have done. Self-hate swelled in my breast. Mulan put down her fork. Her face was twisted in disgust. That's where humans make a baby? Where you go to the bathroom? Mom! Her voice was rising. Yes, I said, looking around conspiratorially. I know. I sighed. It is weird. That part can take some getting used to. Gross, Mulan mumbled. Yeah, I know. As they say, it's like having a waste treatment plant right next to an amusement park. Terrible zoning. What? Mulan said. The thing is, I went on, that's how we evolved. That's where it all happens. And even though going to the bathroom and having sex are both in the same general area, they are actually totally separate. I wanted to add, except for some people for whom it gets all mushed together psychologically, which is sad and creepy in my opinion, but certainly not morally wrong and is actually understandable given the proximity. But that seemed to be getting ahead of the conversation, so I tried to change the direction slightly. Like your nose and your mouth, I ventured. They're both close to each other on your face, but you wouldn't stick a bean sprout up your nose. Mulan gave me a pathetic, lower teeth revealing smile and grunted a charity chuckle. Then she got back to the topic at hand. But Mom, Mulan began again with laser beam focus, how can this ever happen? I mean, men and women, they can never be naked together. Well, I explained, when people are older, much, much older than a kid, when they are older and they both decide they want to under certain circumstances, like if they're in love with each other, well then they can be naked together. But how do they know when? Mulan asked. Does the man say, is now the time to take off my pants? We held each other's gaze for a moment. Yes, I said. That's exactly what they say. Suddenly Mulan laughed. What? I asked. Oh, Mom, you're gonna laugh so hard. Why? It's so funny. I thought you said that the man puts his penis in a woman's vagina, inside of it, and that's how people make a baby. Isn't that hysterical? A pause. That is what I said. Oh, Mulan said. Her face had turned from gaiety to seriousness. There was a long, quiet time. Mulan stared out the window, taking all this in. Mulan asked, what if two people just walked up to each other on the street and started doing it? Our eyes met in the mirror. Her eyebrows were furrowed, and she broke our gaze and looked at some people standing outside Yogurtland. At this point, I decided the best way to approach these questions was to pretend I was Margaret Mead or some dispassionate anthropologist discussing the mating habits of a particular tribe. The human species is very private when it comes to sex. Humans are unusual in this way. They have sex in private. Mulan asked, what if you went to a party and there were a bunch of men and women and they all just started doing it? Would that ever happen? No, I lied. That would never happen. Mom, Mulan said gravely, have you ever done this? Yes, I said flatly. But Mom, you can't have children. That's true, I said. Well, you never have to do that again, Mulan sighed. She sounded relieved. After a moment, I said, well, if you really love someone and you're an adult, then you want to do it even if you can't have a baby. Silence. Mulan stared out the window deep in thought. But, Mom, how can people do that? I mean, how do their legs go? You know, not everyone can do the splits. Ah, the perspective of the proud gymnast. Mulan became somewhat fixated on the role of legs in sex. She could not picture how it was physically possible, even if someone could do the splits. Finally, I said, Mulan, people figure the legs out. They just do. Oh, Mulan said, taking this in. She quieted down and we got home. When we got out of the car, our cat Val was sitting in the front yard, soaking up the last bits of sunlight. Val rolled onto her back. What about cats? Mulan asked. How do they do it? It's basically the same idea, I said. But how do their legs go? Mulan wondered. Well, I think the male stands behind the female and they just do, Mulan, I said, exasperated and disappointed that they just do was the best I could do. What about dogs? Mulan asked, never having considered the possibility before. Same thing, I said. It's basically the same thing for all mammals. But what about their legs? Mulan asked again. Look, I said, now desperately tired of this subject. I've lost my ability to describe it. Maybe we can look on Wikipedia or something and it will show us. So we went to my office and got online. I Googled cats mating, and of course on YouTube there were thousands of videos. We watched a couple of them. Mulan was riveted. She moved her face closer and closer to the monitor. Now what about dogs? She asked. We watched a few dog videos. She put her hand on my arm. I had another moment out of time, like when you're in an accident and time slows to a crawl. I could hear my own breathing as if I were suddenly wearing a spacesuit from 2001. Mulan's hand seemed to be reaching out to my arm in slow motion, frame by frame. I believe I remember it this way because it wasn't until then, until this small, intimate gesture, this gesture of familiarity and of safety, that I realized where I'd led us. Mom, do you think that there would be any videos of humans mating on the internet? I am a monster, an incompetent monster of a mother. I smiled and said firmly, no, there would never be anything like that because humans are so private. And then, hey, how about some ice cream? Which of course was teaching her that when questions about sex get awkward, food is truly the answer. Later that night, Mulan asked, what about Roger and Dawn? How do they do it? I don't know, I said. All right, I was thrown. I thought I would have more time between frogs and same-sex intercourse than just an hour or two. I was out of my depth. Mulan went to the bathroom and took a little longer than usual to come out. Later, she said casually, I think I know how Roger and Dawn do it. Oh, yeah? I said. Yeah, Mom, there's another hole down there where you also go to the bathroom. Maybe, maybe they use that. That's my girl, my Mulan, age 9, inventing anal sex. Smart, inquisitive, problem-solving, Spock-like in objectivity, and with a total lack of squeamishness. Bless her heart. Maybe, I answered her and shrugged my shoulders to indicate, see how casual and easygoing I am? But Mom, she said, what about 2 girls? What about Jill and Eve? How do they do it? I answered meekly. I was beaten. Well, why don't you call Jill and ask her? Mulan asked me. Nah, I said, pretending to be reading the newspaper. Mulan put her face a few inches from mine. She looked disgusted with me. Mom, aren't you even curious?